All right, staying, of course, in the SEC, Auburn and Arkansas. This is an interesting game because of what we saw with Auburn last week. And going into this game, and even a little bit last year, you said you didn't feel like Auburn's secondary was as good as advertised. So we're going into a game against Arkansas where we saw a quarterback against a backup quarterback in Kelley have some success against Alabama. He's got a really live arm, maybe too live at some point. They don't have really the wide receivers I think that LSU has, like with Chark and Gage. But talk a little bit before we get into that specific matchup. Maybe about what you saw from the defensive side. We're going to get in the Auburn offensive crazy meltdown later, but just from the defensive side, what you saw earlier in the year, because you were on that secondary, and what you saw against with that secondary against LSU.
Right. One of the things we flagged in the LSU game was that the majority of the offenses that Auburn had faced through the year were terrible, and most of them were, 100th or worst, really passing. Guys, Clemson has not really shown the fact that they can throw the ball down the field at all yet. Missouri is an absolute disaster. Mississippi State's passing game is at this point extremely poor. Ole Miss was really good as a passing attack, and we felt like maybe that would be an interesting test. Frankly, I felt like Ole Miss was completely out of sync in that ball game. They couldn't handle them at the line of scrimmage at all. The offensive line's terrible, and I felt like Shea Patterson was an absolute erratic mess. We talked about the first half of that game. We flagged that going into the LSU game. They probably left about 17 points on the board just through sheer shoddy execution, drop passes, easy missed throws. But even Ole Miss didn't really chunk the ball downfield that much. The LSU game, to me, really showed that Auburn's corners, which I think are technically sound to a certain degree, could not keep up with the athleticism by LSU's receivers, and they got lost a lot in the secondary. I mean, LSU didn't have that much success, right? 13 of 25. It's easy to sort of discount that, but LSU just chunked it downfield. And you asked me what would be the one thing LSU would need to do to win this game, and I said I thought they probably needed to throw the ball downfield a lot and sort of see what happened because I didn't know whether Auburn's corners could survive in man coverage downfield. It's extremely hard. We've seen a lot of first round draft pick Alabama corners look terrible because teams do this to them, and it's extremely hard to succeed in that situation. And I don't know. I mean, I think there are genuine concerns whether they can handle man coverage on 50-50 balls where really they're having to operate in a lot more space. And that was kind of the story of the game that it didn't take a lot. I mean, they stopped most of LSU's drives, but all it need you really need to give up are two or three plays like that, and it turns into points, and it can turn into a lot of points in a hurry. So I think that's an interesting, you know, data point, and I think it's really interesting because I think Arkansas's passing game has a lot more potential than I would have guessed with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, so talk about a little bit what you saw with Arkansas against Alabama. I know the score wasn't really favorable to them, but they also had a couple of drives that didn't result in scores that they moved the ball really well. So talk about what you saw with Arkansas against Alabama and how you think or whether you think they're going to be able to have success against this Auburn secondary.
If you look at Cole Kelley's stat line, 23-42, 4.8 yards per attempt, one touchdown, one interception, it's it's pretty rough. But I think what that doesn't give enough credit for was the rough situations he was placed in because they got way behind. They were in a pass first situation. Alabama absolutely teed off on them, and the fact that Alabama's run defense is so absolutely phenomenally good that they couldn't run the ball whatsoever in that game. But what I did see was that a guy in Kelley that was willing to stand tall in the pocket, that threw some absolute darts and accurate darts downfield, sometimes too hard for his receivers to catch it, and made some things happen. Now, Arkansas's receiving core is not particularly good. We've talked about that a lot. That's the biggest reason they've taken such a step back. But Kelley is a passer, and I can't believe I'm saying this. Kelley is a passer in many ways looks better than Austin Allen had. Now, Allen, the South Carolina Arkansas game, you got to throw out a little bit because Austin Allen clearly got banged up in that game. They did not throw the ball well at all. I think Allen's been just too beat up all year, and it caught up to him about halfway through the season last year, and it's really showing again this year. the clock in his head's gotten off, and it's what happens to a quarterback when you play on a bad team and you get hit too much. It tends to break you mentally. You get a lot of bad habits. Kelley is absolutely fearless. He is Jamarcus Russell big, and he has a Jamarcus Russell like arm. And I'm amazed at what that kid was able to do. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to have better stat lines than this because the stat line was poor, but man, at times the potential he flashed, the arm strength he flashed, and really what was amazing to me was his ability to make throws under considerable amount of pressure, and to make really accurate throws in tight coverage. I think Kelley has a tremendous amount of potential going forward. I think Arkansas might actually be a better team the second half of the year because of what Kelley brings to the table. And it's just bizarre to me to say that, but that's really how I feel coming out of that ball game.
All right, so let's talk about the Auburn offense. Arkansas's defense might be just what the doctor ordered for the Auburn offense, although their delayed blitz and their linebackers coming late gave Alabama's offensive line a lot of trouble, especially in the second and third quarter in that game before they wore down. Could you see a similar thing happening in this game, given that we have an injury on the offensive on an Auburn offensive line that was already struggling this year? Could you see this Arkansas defense giving Auburn enough trouble to really keep them in the game?
I think it might. It's an interesting question because Alabama's offensive line, we talked about this in the Tennessee Alabama preview, they struggled with Arkansas in pass protection, and there was a point in the second quarter where that game stalled, and every one of those stalled drives happened because Alabama couldn't pass pro in a third and long situation. Arkansas was able through delayed blitz, a little bit through the defensive line that they got stymied a little bit, but it was mainly the linebackers coming on delayed blitzes. They were able to generate a lot of pressure on Alabama, and that they got a few sacks and forced an incompletion and stalled 3 drives. So I think there are signs, especially given the fact that Auburn's offensive line struggled really badly with LSU throwing the football, that if Auburn is in third and long situations, that they may not be able to really handle Arkansas's pass rush. Now, I think maybe it's time to get into the next point of that, which is Auburn has to do a tremendously better job of avoiding obvious down and distance situations, or they're going to run into a lot of problems against any team they face.
Yeah, I think we saw that, and I think it's time that we talk about it because Auburn jumped all over LSU 20-0, and we saw essentially that Gus or whoever's calling the plays, Gus, basically went into a complete protection mode in the first quarter, like maybe early second quarter, where nobody in the building had any doubt what Auburn was going to do, and that was run up the middle or throw a deep shot. And it's interesting to me because they don't necessarily have the offensive line to throw a deep shot when everybody knows it's a deep shot. And they do have a quarterback and wide receivers like Hastings and Stove that are great in space and great underneath, and not a single time do they try to take advantage of that. And it's frustrating because this is the same commentary we had about Auburn after the Clemson game, and to some extent other games this year, is that there's no creativity in the offense, and it's so obvious to everybody in the building what Gus is going to do, and he did the same thing against LSU. So what I'd love for you to talk about a little bit is this a situation where he just kind of melted down in the moment, or is this his DNA? And if so, can Auburn do anything to change that midstream, or are they stuck with this for the rest of the year?
It's, I mean, it's an interesting open question because I don't fully know what the answer is. I don't know. Um, I don't know how you fix some of these issues if it really is the head coach taking over from Lindsey, because Lindsey is a pass first coordinator. And I think everybody knew that, and there was such a high expectation on what they were going to do with this offense, because they were going to bring this great guy in who's this wonderful, uh, you know, noted quarterback guru that can put up 1,000,000 yards, and they have this new guy in Jarrett Stidham that's a great quarterback, and oh, lo and behold, we're gonna, we're gonna turn it on here. We're gonna throw for 1,000,000 yards. We're gonna have our guy in the Heisman hunt, et cetera, et cetera. it obviously didn't play out that way. And I think personally that when you look at this and you look at what they were able to do, I think they've got to be more committed to the run. And you're only going to do that if you're willing to run the ball on non-obvious down and distance. And when I say that, I mean you've got to be willing to run the ball not on first down sometimes, but on second and third. You've got to be willing to pass the ball on first down. And I think as statistics you saw, they ran the ball on 17 first downs in this game. And that's been tweeted a lot and talked about.
In a
Yeah,
row.
in a row. And so every team knew that was coming, and LSU loaded the box. They brought a safety up, and they lost. You know, they lost yardage compared to what they would normally do statistically. I mean, they didn't have the normal production on first down to get good down and distance. I understand that puts you in bad situations, but that's going to happen when you're that obvious. And I understand too that they weren't being able to throw the ball well. But I think this is the flip side to it. Everybody talks about the 17 in a row first down carries. We really hammered them earlier in the year because in the Clemson game, the only times in the second half they ran Petway were on first down or with 1 yard or less to go. And everybody looks at the obvious running situation on first down. What I think they miss is the obvious passing situations on second and third. They did the same freaking thing in this game. I mean, 17 first down carries in a row. But if I look at second and third down were 14 passes, one run in a 1 yard to go situation, and they had 4 runs on any other second or third down. Okay? So when you're talking about 19 plays and 14 of the 19 second or third down, 14 of 19 second or third downs were pass plays by Stidham, and some of them went down as rushes. A couple of them were sort of design runs, but a lot of those were scrambles or sacks. When I say passes, I mean called pass plays. 14 out of 19 second and third down plays stayed in Stidham's hands. That lets the defense know you're not going to run the ball. They're going to call a pass blitz, and they're going to kind of tee off on you. And it killed them. It killed them in that.
And that's a team. This is a team in LSU that struggles with rush defense.
Right. And when they did run the ball on those second and third downs, they ran for 4 yards or more most of the time. And they had a second and 6. They ran the ball, and lo and behold, they get 6 yards on the first down. That was the opening drive of the second half. And the next time they get to a first and 10 on their 44, Petway runs for a 2-yard loss with second and 12. They immediately throw an incomplete pass to Darius Slayton. They get a substitution infraction. 3rd and 17, they're forced to throw an incomplete pass to Will Hastings. And you talk about down and distance, but it's important on first down to try to get positive yardage so that you're second and short or second and medium. But where they've really, I think, completely lost their mind is when they do get to second and medium, like Auburn's next drive, right? Kerryon Johnson runs for 6 yards on first down to the Auburn 36. 2nd and 4, they throw another pass to Darius Slayton that's incomplete. 3rd and 4, Stidham gets sacked by Devin White for a loss of 1 yard, and that was the 23-14 mark. Where you really felt like with about 4 minutes to go in the third quarter, things were starting to turn. You got to have a little more faith in your run offense than that. And it's easy to say, well, the run offense wasn't working. Well, it wasn't working because you ran the ball in every first down and LSU knew it, and they brought a safety down. And then you get to second and third and they back off. And it's exactly like the Clemson game where they, every run came on first down, and every second and third, if it was a medium or longer, was a pass. Your offense isn't going to work. And you started with saying, whoever's fault it is, Gus, and whoever called these plays, Gus. I don't think Gus is necessarily calling the plays, but what this screams to me is somebody that's not looking at a balance sheet, that isn't looking at play selection, isn't looking at tendencies, and is just calling on pure feel on the field. And I think what's happening is they get to first down, and Malzhan saying, well, we got to run here. We need to run here. We got to establish the run. And it doesn't work as well as he wants because LSU knows it's coming. Now they get to second and medium, second and long. And they go, okay, well, we need to mix things up. We got to throw it. We need to throw it. And what he doesn't realize, because he's on the field and he's got a million things going on, is every first down he's saying we got to establish the run, and it never works because LSU knows it's coming. So every second down he says, well, the run's not working, we got to mix things up. It becomes way too predictable, and the offense that put up 20, got up 20 to nothing like we expected, suddenly goes off the rails, and that's how in the second half, I mean, like they have this game, like they did the Georgia game last year. It's like when they get challenged, Gus feels like he has to. I really don't think he's calling the actual play. I think he's just saying we need to run here, we need to pass here, and he has no real idea what's going on, and he doesn't have any sheet in front of him to really tell him just how utterly predictable he's gotten, and it completely torpedoes the offense.
So we've spent most of this time killing Auburn. Let's go ahead and get into the computer model. Does the computer model kill Auburn as much as we've been doing so far, or do the numbers look a little bit better for them in this game?
Well, I mean, the numbers do look better for them because Arkansas is not a very good team, and I think one caveat here is the model is looking at Arkansas based off past performances, and Arkansas did have Austin Allen hurt in that South Carolina game, destroyed a lot of statistical averages they had. And then they got absolutely stymied by Alabama, and I don't know how much I completely buy some of these numbers, so I wanted to throw that asterisk out there. But this score has Auburn 35, Arkansas 10. And the reason it has that is because Auburn still holding teams to about 70% of their opponent rush averages, fell off quite a bit against LSU, holding teams to about 79% of pass averages, which is very good. We've already established the fact that I'm a little hesitant to say that number is what it really necessarily should be, especially since the LSU game, LSU ended up passing their normal statistical average. But Arkansas defensively is just not very good. 116% of opponent rush averages, 100% of opponent pass averages. They're not good on really any way you want to slice it when defensively. So, this should be what the doctor ordered for Auburn. They should average almost 6 yards per carry. It's really well established at this point that Auburn's offense is completely different when they can run the ball successfully. So much of Malzahn's scheme is based off making you compensate against the run and then exploiting weaknesses, safeties in the box or what have you against the pass. Again, we've already established none of that matters because if the other team knows what you're doing, because they may walk a safety up on first down, but then they're going to walk him back. Auburn does not have a true passing attack in terms of a sophisticated route tree that can beat standard coverages. They really have to have you overcompensate or miss something. That's part of Malzahn's scheme. And, so they do need to run the ball successfully. And here they should. And because of that, they should be able to generate quite a bit of points like everybody has. I mean, Arkansas gave up 24 points to New Mexico State. And if you want to look back at it in an FBS play, I mean, they gave up 43 to Texas A&M, only 28 to TCU, but in a 28-7 game, and TCU's kind of had to come on after that. But in the last three SEC games, they've given up over 40 points in every game. So 35 points is actually maybe more conservative than people might guess. You're saying they score less than South Carolina did or Texas A&M. But I think the key is the fact that Auburn's defense should be plenty good to stop Arkansas's offense. Arkansas's offense has been anemic in most games, except maybe that A&M game where they threw the ball around a ton. The big question mark to me is how much better is Cole Kelley than what we've seen? Is the Alabama game a good indicator, or was that a game where Alabama is just so good defensively that they completely stopped it? And I think there's an argument for it. You have to understand Alabama is much healthier than they have been since the Florida State game. They lost 4 linebackers in that game, and they were a little bit crippled defensively. As good as they were crippled defensively, and they're getting those guys back, and they're starting to become an absolute killer. And I think that's the question mark is Arkansas really going to get 5.4 yards per attempt in this game, or is Cole Kelley going to give them a little bit of a spark? And it has to do with your ability to beat man coverage. Can he make the throw? Sure. But again, we haven't seen any sign that Arkansas's receivers are really adept enough to beat Auburn's corners, which was the issue in the LSU game. So, maybe Arkansas's leading receiver, who he was the number one junior college receiver, hadn't really shown up all year. And then all of a sudden in that game, he kind of turns it on a little bit. maybe he can sort of turn things around for him. But I still think 35-10 is probably a pretty accurate score because everything we're saying is just a lot of ifs and buts, and that's not worth a whole lot.
Yeah, I think for me though, and this is where I'll probably break away from you a little bit. I think Arkansas offensively is going to have a lot more success than they did against, from a point standpoint, than they did against Alabama. They put up 9 against Alabama. They did enough in that game to score 17, 19. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
So, and I think Alabama's got a much better secondary and a better pass rush than Auburn right now. Auburn's run defense is spectacular. The issue here is Arkansas is not going to run it that much. They're not a good running team. Whaley's all right as a running back, but they didn't run any against Alabama and still put up a good amount of yards in the air. I think we're looking more at around of a 7.5 yard per attempt kind of day from whoever plays quarterback for Arkansas, especially given the issues in the Auburn secondary. And I think Auburn's going to be reeling a little bit after this loss to LSU. I know Gus said all their goals are ahead of them, but losing a game like they just lost is a gut punch. And they almost, in my opinion, need an off week to sort of, circle the wagons and refocus. They got some issues in the locker room with Kyle Davis being, I think, booted from the team. It's a little bit unsettling right now if you're an Auburn fan. So I like the 37 or the 35. I'm going to go 37. I could see it inching into 40 for Auburn. But the reason I don't think Auburn's going to score a ton where they have in the past against inferior teams, even like we saw against Ole Miss, is I think Arkansas is going to be able to score a little bit. So give me 37. Give me 40-24 Auburn. I think they're going to give us some points here. I think Auburn fans are going to be dissatisfied at the end of this game just from what they saw in the week before with LSU. And I think Gus is in real danger at this point of losing his job. We've been defenders of his on this show. But the things we saw against LSU are inexcusable. I mean, blowing a 20-point lead is one thing when the other team is on fire. Your defense gave up essentially 17 points in this game. 17 points. Yes, you had a special team score, but you've got the ball after LSU does all this coming back. You've got the ball at midfield with 1 yard to go, and you need a yard to get into a position where you can kick a field goal and win the game. And he didn't do it. He punted. And I just keep wanting to see Gus not do the things he's done, to be so predictable and to be so stubborn offensively, which is what led him to go out and get a new offensive coordinator to begin with, was to let him run the show. And I don't think he's letting him run the show. And I think there's some real coaching issues there that just aren't getting fixed for a program that honestly deserves better. And him coming out and saying after this game that it's not the end of the world is one of the most tone-deaf responses to a loss I've ever seen. No, nothing except the end of the world is the end of the world. But you're making millions of dollars a year in a state where your fans care a whole lot about football. They deserve better than that response. They deserve a fiery, angry, upset, and accountable coach, and they didn't get that. They got what they've kind of always got, just kind of a mealy-mouthed, whatever excuse. No, you got to own it and do better, and he's doing neither. So that was frustrating to me as a football fan. You got anything else on this game?
I think one thing I'll say at the end is I think the injury to Dunn was pretty devastating to Auburn's offense. They were already having a shuffle because Mike Horton's injury, and they had Golson playing guard. When Golson, really what happened when Dunn got injured is it forced Golson to play center, and the guards were at that point were not able to hold up, and they gave up a tremendous amount of interior pressure. They couldn't get any push in the run game. They're giving up a lot of guys just getting blown up in the backfield, and I think that's sort of something to watch for Auburn going forward. Is no one can take a lot of injuries on the offensive line generally. You don't have enough players on roster and experienced guys. But I think that's really been kind of brutal for them when they already had offensive line issues. And they I felt like got things settled a little bit. That Dunn had played pretty good center, and they managed to shuffle it around so that they could keep James somewhere else. And now all that's thrown back into flux, and they end up with the same offensive line issues that they'd had early in the season. So I think that's something to keep an
So
eye
that's
on.
it for Auburn and Arkansas. If we sound a little frustrated or dejected, it's because we've pulled for Gus for a long time. Even when Auburn fans were being ridiculous about wanting to let him go or whatever, we pulled for the guy because honestly, we expect at this level and with the success he's had in the past, we expect more from him in terms of adjustments, play calling, overall awareness, and not taking 3 games into the season to really get rolling and to have a setback like this. It's pretty alarming. And finally, I'm in the space with a lot of the rest of the Auburn fans that are saying it might be time to look for a change, especially if he loses to Alabama and Georgia. If he loses those 2 games, he's done. If he wins one of them, he'll get another year probably.